And if you have questions while your mic is off, please feel free to type them. I'll do my best to keep track of them, and then we can ask them all at the appropriate time.
Yes, I'd like to have all the questions at the end. I have 3 short videos to get through. So as we're going through, go ahead and put your questions in the chat so we can not forget any of them when we get to the end of this, and we'll go from there. So,
well, before we go any further, I want to thank you, Stacy, very much for being part of this with Whole Foods Co-op in Duluth, Minnesota. If you guys have wanted any more virtual classes, check us out at wholefoods.coop online. And now we're going to turn over to you for Herbalism Part 9.
Herbalism, yeah, for beginners. And thanks for coming. And for those of you that haven't, just put the questions in the chat, Doug, to everybody, so everybody can see them. Yeah, don't send them direct. Put them right in the general chat. So my name's Stacy Quaid, and I am from Duluth, Minnesota, and that's where this class is being presented by. I was born and raised here, so we're in the upper Midwest. So all of the information is based on the area around us and the kind of woodland topography that we have in our area, sort of the boreal forest and some mixed hardwood and field kind of terrain that we're talking about, the plants that grow in this region. We're a zone, depending on where you live, 3 or 4, if that helps you understand kind of the climate from wherever you are from. So when we're talking about things today, and I'm showing you the videos that the season of what we're growing right now might be a little different from where you live, but we'll go from there. I need someone to ask to enable subtitles because I thought that was supposed to just automatically happen, but I'm not seeing them. Andre, can you help me with that?
I am looking into it right now.
There it is. Got it. Thank you, Diane. All right. So I think we're ready to go. So I'm going to do my best to be efficient with sharing the screen and showing you some plant ID videos that I took in my yard over the last week and a half. And we'll talk about some herbal friends. So let's see. I'm gonna share the screen. And then we're gonna start with, oops, get that out of the way. Video 1. Oops, nope, that's not the right way. I thought I had this figured out. I've got it, and here we go.
However, thunderstorms are in the forecast for tonight. Well, if you're planning to borrow money, you want to watch what the Fed's doing this week. They are expected to raise interest rates once again in an attempt to combat inflation, which hit, of course, a 40-year high last month. The goal is for consumers to dial back their spending.
Stacy, we can't hear the video.
Oh, okay, hang on. I'm going to start it over. I need to, when I share the screen, I need to remember how to share the sound. Thank you. Forgot that step. All right, let's try this again. Okay.
Going back out into the garden. I don't have my helper today.
Can you hear it
So I'll
now?
be flipping the screen here in a second.
Yes.
And you'll just hear my
Thank
voice
you.
as we're looking at the plants. So let's get started. I wanted to go back to some of our wild edibles from, I think, class 4. You should have a handout that was made available to you if you were able to attend that class. And this is one of our favorite free salad herbs. This is called Amaranth. And there's all kinds of different species of amaranth, and they're all edible and tasty. So this one will get another probably 2 feet taller. We don't have any of it growing that big just yet, but you can see the leaf structure here. This is kind of a tougher, thicker leaf, so it gives you some good density to your salad. So I'm going to end up picking all of this out of here instead of just cutting the leaves and using the top green parts, which would grow back, because it's growing on top of one of the annuals that I planted called Goticolo, which is a kidney remedy. Underneath here we can see some chickweed growing. Again, this is a great salad herb. Chickweed's very moistening and succulent. It's very tasty in a green salad. It has some essential fatty acids in it, and it's used as a topical wound wart. It's very moistening and soothing to the skin for things like burns and scratches and scrapes and things like that. If we look back here a little further, we see lamb's quarters. Lamb's quarters, its nickname is goosefoot, as you can see by the shape of the leaf. This is another really tasty herb to put in your salad. So it's super high in iron, and it's very prolific. It grows very nicely in the garden, and again, it gets pretty tall. It's probably about a 3-foot plant right there. And you can pick that and eat it all through the season. When it gets more mature, it gets this little seed head on top of it. That'll grow up and be a little clump of seeds, which you can also eat and use. They've got some protein in them. This gray coating on this plant is actually not something bad. It's not a fungus like some plants get from the heat. It's a protective coating that the plant generates itself to keep the bugs away from it and keep the bugs from chewing on it. So you can still eat it when it's at this stage, but some people don't care for the texture. We can see on this little plant here something else is growing. This is called Bittersweet Vine. You can see it growing all down here on the ground. And this you want to get rid of if you have this growing in your yard, in your garden, because you can see how it's kind of getting all over everybody else. And this this vine is nicknamed bindweed because it binds everybody up. And it also has a property which it secretes into the ground, and what it does is it makes it sort of intolerant for other things to grow there. So pretty soon all you'll have is just a big patch of bindweed and nothing else won't want to be growing nearby it. So if you start seeing little leaves like this growing, see how it wants to spread, you really got to get on that and keep it pulled out of your garden. This is St. John's wort. St. John's wort is a remarkable herb for helping us with clearing our blood and helping our liver to clear toxins. That's one of the reasons why there's contraindications of it with certain medications, because it can actually help your system work so well that it clears things out quicker than maybe we would want them to get out of your body. So that's some of the precaution around St. John's wort. It also works in the brain in areas where certain meds for mental health, certain neurotransmitting meds are utilized, and it can work in the same area, so it can enhance or inhibit some of the effects of those medications. St. John's wort is signature. I'm going to pick this little one. Doctrine and Signatures is about the blood. And if you rub that yellow flower, which tells us it's about the nervous system, as you're picking it, it actually turns into a red oil. And that tells us that it's good for our blood. One of the other things that is a signature for this plant, and I don't know if you're going to be able to see this or not, but is that the leaf actually has little pinholes in it. It grows that way, little perforations, where the Hypericum, that's its Latin name, secretes, they're like little oil glands. And those pinholes help us to remember that it's for issues that poke us, anxiety that's pokey, little sharp perforations in our psyche. And it's also the signature for wounds that poke us, like puncture wounds. And so it's a really good first aid plant to have in your toolbox if you're going camping and things, because it's a really good topical wound healer. It's antiseptic, it's analgesic, it has a great deal of pain relieving properties, and so it can help with pain from a wound, but also pain from like something like sciatica or a twisted knee or things like that. You don't want to take St. John's wort during the summer months when it's really sunny out. It has a property that makes us photosensitive, and you can get sunburned if you have that in your system and you're out in the sun without protection. This is wood Buttony, Stachies Aficionalis. I think we talked about this one in our last class. Can see it's come into flower. So we would already have harvested the leaves for our remedy for this year. And wood Buttony, again, is to help with circulation to the brain and helping with trauma to the brain itself, and helping with fluid rebalancing. People that have had concussions can benefit from this herb, and I've used it in the past in treating people post-traumatic brain injury. So it's very useful in that way. This is borage. Borage is moistening, mucilaginous, beautiful, juicy skin healer. It's great topically for wounds. It's got this beautiful blue flower. Borage is used a lot in flower essences and homeopathic remedies for brightness and for resilience. They say borage for courage. Internally, borage can be used for short periods of time to help with moistening and healing tissues in that way. But it has some caution. It's a cousin. It has some of the same property as comfrey, that there is a chemical in there called pyrazidine alkaloids, which can be toxic to our liver. So we take this one in herbal form in small amounts for short periods of time. And this is comfrey. It rained really hard here last night, so it's kind of a little bit beaten down at the moment, but it'll perk back up. Comfrey has these wonderful purple flowers. The butterflies love this plant. Symphytum Aficionalis. And Comfrey stimulates tissue healing and cell growth. And so it's a great topical. As you can see, the doctrine of signatures, it grows like crazy. So it helps our skin regenerate and heal itself like crazy. Makes a wonderful moistening, soothing lotion or salve. As you can see how it's growing here though, that's the caution. That's one of the cautions about Comfrey, is that it's so excited about how good of a healer it is that sometimes it can heal a wound over too quickly and cause trouble when it's not healing from the inside deep enough. And so you want to make sure that if you're using it on a wound, that it's a very superficial wound or a burn. The leaves are fuzzy. Can you see the fuzziness on the stem? They're kind of prickly. That tells us that it could be good for soothing skin that's prickly. If you're going to use Comfrey on something deeper, you always want to pair it with Yarrow. Yarrow for sure, because that's going to heal from the deep inside to the outside. And it will slow down and help direct the Comfrey to work with with a slower pace. Comfrey also has those pyridine alkaloids, which internally can be toxic to our livers, but taken in small amounts for short periods of time as a tea for somebody in a really, really dry condition can be appropriate. This one you need to use with caution. Okay, so that was video number 1. And keep putting questions in the chat and comments, and we're going to go straight into video 2. If I can get back to the main screen here. There we go. Here we have elder. It just has come into flower. This is Sambucus canadensis. Sambucus nigra is another one that maybe you would find in Commerce. You may know elder already because it's a pretty common herb nowadays in mainstream pharmacy. You can get elder cough syrup for your children. It's an antiviral, so it's been used a lot in the last couple of years for COVID and colds and flus. The flower is more diffusive than the berries. The flower is used widely for treating children. It's helpful for moving a fever. It helps with clearing the lungs. A good formula to support lung is elderflower mixed with yarrow and mullein and some kind of mint and helichrysum, if you can get some of that. And mix it all together and make tea out of it. And it's tasty and it's really helpful to soothe those dry burning lungs that need some fluid and to move a fever. Right over here behind my shoulder is Angelica. We talked about Angelica in our last class, and she was not quite this tall yet. There she is, to back up so you can see how big she is. She's taller than the elderbush. You can really see the organ system that Angelica can help us with by looking at that deep red vein, sign of helping our blood, and those little poofy, beautiful flower heads that are showing us something that is the same shape as our alveoli in our lungs. Can't quite get a good close-up of the seeds for you. Not quite fully flowering yet, but can you look up a picture of what your little air sacs in your lungs look like? They look very similar to that. So we can tincture this, we can make a tea out of it. It's really nice and warming and oily. It's got a real grounding feel to it when you drink it as a tea. Some people, for culinary use, will take the leaves when they're very little, well before it's gotten this tall. See if we can find some little leaves. And they candy them for a little sweet and warming treat. So that's Angelica. Angelica. Here's our Arnica. This is Arnica chamicinus, chamicinus. It's a cousin that is zone tolerant here. It's very similar in properties and look to Arnica Montana, which is the one that most of the remedies you'll see in commerce are made out of. Smaller flowers, probably about half the size as a whole, the whole plant. If you have them side by side, they look a lot alike. This one's just a little bit tinier version. Interchangeable, a great topical for bruises, sprains, strains. It's like have this one in the first aid kit. Arnica is taken internally only in homeopathic form. Be very irritating into our internal tissues, and if you're using it as a topical, you don't want to put it on an open wound. You want to tincture the flowers fresh, and if you're making an oil, the flowers will tend to poof after they dry. So you want to dry them out maybe for a day or two until they start to look a little fuzzy, and then get those into your oil. So that'll get some of the moisture out of it before you put that fresh herb into the oil. And then when you're infusing a fresh herb in oil, you have to infuse it with the cover just slightly cracked to let that moisture that's heating out of the oil get out of there, because if you have water in your infused oils, they will go bad really quickly. So another way that you can preserve the Arnica so that you make sure you have it in the winter time if you need it is to freeze them. Freeze the little flower tops in, just in a bag in the freezer, and then you can pull them out and you can make an infusion and use it as a poultice. Or you can infuse that oil, and if you're not sure if you've gotten all of the moisture out of it, you can freeze that in little packets as well and just use that as a topical compress. Here we have bone set, Eupatorium Purpurea, perforated. Look at how the leaf grows. The stem goes right through the center of the leaf. Nickname is knit bone. This will have bone white flowers on the top here in another week or two. So bone set is, of course, used to help bones to heal faster and knit faster. And Matthew Wood talks about how it seems to have a way of getting the broken ends of the bones to communicate with each other, to help them line back up and find their place together and to knit back together in a good straight way. Comfrey also has the nickname of knit bone, but because we talked earlier about how comfrey sometimes gets too excited and heals things too quickly, if you're using comfrey for something like that, you have chances of having the bone heal crookedly. So we always want to use bone set itself, Eupatorium Purpurea, when we're looking to use it for bone healing. Bone set is also a very powerful fever remedy, and for flus, it's for flus that make you ache to the bone, and it can help move a fever, and it can help decrease those body aches when you're having something of that nature. So we used a lot this last few years during COVID as well. And here's our other Eupatorium. This is Eupatorium Purpurea. This is gravel root or Joe Pye weed. So as you can see, it's a little different looking than the bone set. It does not have leaves that are split by the stem. This flower is going to end up being a really dark, lovely, sort of a magenta purple. And it's growing, as you can see, right by where it's wet in the water. So gravel root grows where there's fluid and solid imbalances that need to be worked out. When you dig, we use the root, and when you dig it up, oftentimes the root will have little pieces of gravel kind of caught up in the roots. It's used for stones in our body, kidney stones, gallstones, and it's very useful for helping to break those up and dissolve them. So we use this when someone's having trouble with kidney stones. It's also really useful for gravelly joints, things like gout and swelling and fluid imbalances in joints. And I've used this with many people when they've had trouble with the joints in their fingers and their hands and some swelling that creates inflammation and decreased range of motion. So this reedy plant growing next to the Joe Pye weed is called Calamus, Acorus calamus. Here's the flower down here. Kind of just grows right out of the stem. With calamus, we use the root. It clearly grows where the ground is wet. It likes it wet. It's got very warming, oily, diffuse, and pungent properties. The tops of the plant were actually used in ancient times as a strewing herb. It's got a really wonderful kind of almost citronella flavored smell. And when you crush it, it's got this lemony fragrance. So they would use this on the floors before, like when floors were dirt, things like that, to help with managing the mud, and also it would help with keeping away mites and bugs and things like that because of the oily smell and that brightness. So we used it in that way. We use the root, and we can dry it and tincture it. It's got a very pungent and warming sensation to it. So we can use it for throat issues. We can use it for issues of needing to be lubricated but also diffused. Jim McDonald has a wonderful, wonderful write-up in his Materia Medica on his website, herbcraft.org, and talks all about calamus in depth, not only the physical uses, but also the emotional and mental and spiritual properties that it shares with us as well. It's a good resource to check out. This is Philanthus, and I'm blanking on its Latin name. Philanthus is an annual here where I live. This plant comes to us from, I think, South Africa, places like that. It is got properties that are numbing, so it's really useful for things like toothaches. Its nickname is actually the toothache plant, and you can pull a leaf off and chew on it, and it will make your tongue and your mouth go numb, like Novocaine. So we use this for wound healing. I use this in my sore throat spray remedy that I have, along with Echinacea and stone root and propolis, because that's good for your throat as well. In the country of origin where it's from, they use it actually in cooking. A friend of mine introduced me to that idea several years ago, where they just take a little pinch of it, ground up like a spice, and they put it in the food, and it's supposed to open up the flavor of the food more so that you can taste it with more intensity. So that would be another thing to play around with. So this one you can usually find in the spring at the farmer's market or the farmers or the greenhouses, and it's a fun one to have, not only because it's so interesting looking, but a really useful medicine for sore throats, painful wounds, and topical healing in that way. This is Valerian. Valerian is a very powerful nervine. It's sedative properties. It helps our bodies relax. It's more of a restless body than it is a busy brain, although it pairs well with things like skullcap. Together, the two of them can assist helping you sleep from difficulties of both. It's got a very pungent, kind of musty smell to it when it's growing, and when you're drying the root, that gets intensified. A lot of people don't even bother drying the root because it is so musty and pungent smelling, and it smells like dirty socks when it's drying. So you actually want to try and dry it somewhere, maybe outdoors if it's possible. Tincture the root fresh, that's the best way to do it, or put it into vinegar. About 10% of the population actually reacts in the opposite way to our friend Valerian, where it will not sedate them, but kind of make them more awake and restless. So if you're going to try this one for the first time, you want to make sure you try it during the day in just a real low dose to see how it's going to affect your body. And another thing to think about is if you're the kind of person that reacts in the opposite way to, like when people take Benadryl, and Benadryl makes you sleepy, but if Benadryl and other over-the-counter medications like that make you more awake, then you might have more of a chance of reacting in the same opposite way to Valerian.
Right. One more to go, and this last one's a little bit shorter, I think. So then we can do some talking.
This is red clover, and red clover is an herb for our lymphatic system. It has some phytoestrogenic properties, so there are some cautions for certain conditions and times, especially in a female's life, where this might not be the first lymphatic we would choose to go with, but overall it has more benefit in broad spectrum besides these limitations. and it can be used for helping the lymphatic system to move fluid, clear stagnation, and help with the conditions that are associated with that, like arthritis, skin problems, systemic infections, and such. So because of the phytoestrogenic properties, some of the side effects might be similar to things that would happen when someone is out of balance with their estrogen. They might have bloating, some breast tenderness, and some other kinds of similar symptoms noted. So right alongside of the red clover, though, we have another lymphatic, calendula. It's just starting to open right now. So all this green patch all the way across here is all calendula, some other clover mixed in, and it goes way down there. I have calendula patches all over the yard. Calendula is another lymphatic. It's more warming in nature, and it's a very broad spectrum. It does not have that hormonal impact that some of the other lymphatics do, so it's a good one. It's safe for kids and elders. It's used for where the sun don't shine. Matthew Wood refers to calendula as herbal sunshine. So it's used for places that like on the inside of our bodies or nooks and crannies where we have trouble with bacteria. Calendula has some antibacterial properties and helps to our body to kind of contain and regulate that and escort it out of the system. So it's helping to move the fluids as well. So it's antiviral, antibacterial. It's used for infections, for drying up pussy, damp areas, and for things like colds that have a lot of watery imbalance and want to move fluids out and help dry up tissues. It's a really good one for pairing with things that would be for the GI tract, like healing ulcers. Ulcers often have a bacterial component to them, so we might pair calendula with plantain and maybe some meadowsweet to help heal internal mucous membranes. It's a really easy one to plant. It's in the marigold family, and you can get seeds. And once it seeds, it's a self-seeding annual. So everything that you see here in this whole patch was just seeded from the original package. And there's clover mixed in there and some dill and some other things, but all along the ground here, this green is all going to be just a big patch of yellow here in another couple of weeks. And you can sort of propagate the seeds. You can take the seeds once they're dry and kind of intentionally help them to spread where you want them, and you will never run out of calendula. We talked about yarrow in our last class. Just wanted to give you a picture of it in bloom here now. So if you remember what we talked about, that yarrow is a blood balancer, and it's good for healing cuts, and it's also good for helping blood to move. So if you go back to our last class, you can get more of the details about the rest of the amazing properties of yarrow. It's a really good foundational herb to have in your medicine kit. This is rose. So many different kinds of roses in the world. All the species are interchangeable and have medicinal properties. Some of them are more specific than others. I have 3 different roses growing in my garden. One's a climbing rose, a William Baffin it's called. It's this one over here. This one in the middle. She was just very beautiful this year. I'm going to try and get a close-up of the rose hips that are starting. This is one of the ways that we use the rose for medicine. This little thing down at the bottom of the flower will turn into the rose hip, we call it. We're going to wait for those to turn red, and we gather them in the fall. and those are used because they're really high vitamin C content. So you're able to make tea out of that, or infuse it into honey and get some extra vitamin C for the winter months. Lots of people will gather the rose petals when they're fresh. These are getting a little past, and save the rose petals and make infusions, put them into hydrosols, or make a hydrosol with them, or make a rose petal honey, or dry them for tea. Rose is very soothing. It's very calming energetically. People use rose to help them with many of their emotional balancing needs. And it's mildly astringent, so it makes a wonderful toner. And skin healing. It's used in a lot of different lotions and salves for soothing skin and helping people feel calm and balanced. This is the Monarda that we looked at in our last class. This is Monarda didyma. This is a cultivar. It's not Monarda fistulosa, which would have a really light lavender looking flower. My fistulosa is in the backyard and it's not quite blooming yet, but I wanted to give you a look at the flower. So this is the shape of the flower that you'll find on all Monardas. You can see it looks almost like a little crown. And again, if you remember from the last class, Monarda is a specific for antifungal and antiviral. It's good for the urinary tract and the bladder, for things like, and for down there for yeasty conditions and infections of that nature. And it's also really good for as an antiviral for different kinds of colds and flus. And here's our chamomile that came to bloom. Again, we were talking about chamomile in our last class, and it was just a little short feathery leaf at that time. Here's some younger stuff growing. And people were wondering what the flower looked like. Well, here we are. You can see how daisy-like it is and how tall it grew. So I can back up and show you. So it gets really tall and leggy. Chamomile is one of our safest herbs for babies, for elders, for calming. It's a gentle nervine. Gentle but very powerful. And it's a great digestive herb and skin tonic. The yellow flowers that you were seeing and mixed in with the chamomile are Rudbeckia, brown-eyed Susans. They're a cousin of this beautiful Echinacea. This is Purpurea. Echinacea angustifolia is the one that you'll see a lot of times in Commerce. We can use the Purpurea in a similar fashion. And people use Echinacea for helping to proactively remedy colds and flu symptoms. It's antiviral in some respects, but it's originally was used more as a GI herb. It's a little bit bitter, and it has an effect for helping to regulate the gut and help with upset stomach and tonifying and moving, helping things to move because of the bitter properties. And there's some thought that that's why it works to help us when we are perhaps getting a cold or something, is that it helps that whole system of elimination to help debug us, so to speak. And most of the time in Commerce, you'll see that it's the roots that is used, but you can dry the tops and the flowers and use them as a tincture or as a tea and have similar results. So you don't have to dig up the plant and disturb it to take some of the root in order to make your medicine. I wanted to just take a couple of minutes to talk about ways to dry and preserve your plants. So this is one easy way, if you're limited on space, that you can just hang up your bundles and make sure that they're beautifully air dried. You want to keep your bundles small so that the air has time to get through and things in the middle get dried out thoroughly. This is a bunch of different mints and lemon balm that I have been harvesting and are ready to now come off of here You can hear how crunchy and crumbly they are. So you're going to be stripped off of the stems now and put into their jars. This is raspberry leaf. This one's not quite dry all the way. And that's because the stems are so thick. There's a lot of liquid that gets, moisture that gets held in the leaves or in the stems. And so what I'm going to do with that today is I'm going to take that and strip it off of the stem and just finish drying the leaves fully on a screen. So I make sure they're really dry before I put them in the jars. So let's go look at the screens. So this is the counter in the herb shop. And I'm lucky enough that I have space to do this. So I have just these screens that actually a friend of mine made and wasn't using them anymore, so I got to have them. But you can use old window screens. They work really well. And then I just have these little short sticks of wood that have been cut to length so they fit my space. This is the St. John's wort drying. And let's check it. Still a little damp, so that'll be staying out for a few more days. I put the paper underneath for things that would dry and crumble through onto the next layer down. But here we have the red clover, and underneath on the bottom is also another layer of red clover, which I gather quite a bit of. And so because that matches, we don't have to worry about having the paper in between there. And that's actually better because the air gets through and the things dry more quickly. These are dandelion leaves. Here's some turkey tail mushroom that I found in the woods when we were cutting our firewood. Mushrooms is a whole nother layer of medicinal magic. So this is a good way that you can do drying. Once you get them dried, you're going to want to store them in jars. Here's a shot of a little bit of a shot of the herb closet here. Everything labeled. And I also put, you can order these or you can save them from, if you get supplements from your vitamin bottles and things, these little silica packets. Those really can help to keep all the moisture out. Here's the Monarda from last year, a little bit left. And that's a good way to keep, you want to keep your dried herbs in a dark closet in a cool space in your house. These are all tinctures that have been started and are doing their thing. So you're going to shake those up every day or every couple times a week and get through. You're going to leave those in the menstruum for up to several months depending on what you're making, and then you're going to strain the herbs out. Make sure you strain all the matter out. We call that the mark, really carefully. And then again, stored in jars, everything labeled. You want to go through and check your tinctures every once in a while to make sure that you did get all the mark out of them. Because if there's anything sedimenty left in there, you're gonna have your tinctures go off. So just a couple of ways that you can think about preserving what you're learning about and harvesting for the season. So I hope this class has been helpful and that it's given you some ideas and some little breadcrumbs to help you on your path to learning more about herbs that you can harvest for your medicine and for your nutrition. And just remember, these are just the tip of the iceberg. We're talking about each plant for 5 minutes, and there's so much more you can learn about each one of these herbal allies. So I hope that you continue to search out more information as you get to know them better. Please do also remember that when you are harvesting and taking a herb or plant from the earth, that you ask permission and make sure that you're gathering in safe, clean spots. So do your research and do your meditation and get grounded and connected before you harvest. And only harvest what you need. and give back, give an offering, give back to the earth before you take. So, and if you do your meditation and you get an answer that says do not gather, please honor that. I was just out last week trying to gather some linden flower. The basswood trees are flowering in our area right now, and it's really hard to find linden that's not on the boulevard because they plant them in town as boulevard trees. Well, I thought I had come across some on the outside edges of a local business that had a parking lot that bordered some wooded area. So I went to those trees on the far edge and I asked, and I got a really strong no. And I went to a few different of the trees in the different parts of the area to see if I could get farther away. And every time the tree said no. So I honored that. And so far I don't have any linden flower gathered, but it's better to trust that and listen to the earth and listen to the herbs, because they're gonna connect with you and you'll know what to do. So, green blessings.
Okay. So, shall we go to the chat and answer some questions? Or if someone just has something that they want to unmute and ask, we can do there too. Maybe, Andre, can you help me with this part?
I sure can. I have a bunch of the questions written down, or we can scroll through, or you can have them
Okay.
ask however you would like.
Yeah, let's start with the ones you have written down and we'll go from there.
Sure. Does Comfrey work on skin ulcers?
If it's superficial enough, you can go ahead and use it just topically kind of straight up. But if it's any sort of depth to it at all, you want to pair it with something else.
All right. What would you pair it with?
Yarrow, maybe the Philanthus if it was painful, something that's got some antiseptic properties, something that's going to slow down. For sure, Yarrow. Yarrow really does get to the depth of the wound and helps it heal from the inside. Plantain's another good one to pair it with, because that's going to draw out any pus or bacteria or things like that that might be nesting in there. So,
all right. And then the next one is, what part of St. John's wort is used for antiseptic or topical?
So we always use the flowers. Some people will take part of the leaf top as well, but I really try and just use mostly just the flower top. So, and that's what's going to give you that lovely red oil or tincture. As soon as you put those yellow flowers into the menstruum, it starts to turn red almost right away. So,
okay, and then is there photosensitivity with that?
Yes, there is. Yep. So when people take that internally for things like emotional distress, we really want to be mindful that that's like in the winter months when maybe seasonal affective disorder gets to people and things like that. So you got to be careful with the St. John's in the sun.
Okay, and the next question, in what form do you use bone set for flu?
I usually give that to people as a tincture because unless they have someone that's helping them with their medicines and getting things into their bodies, because making tea when you're sick is sometimes hard for people. It's easier to take a tincture. If there's an opportunity to do an and both, that's always a good thing to do. Bone set's kind of funny. It's got this really strong flavor, but they say that when you need it, it tastes good to you, and as soon as you don't need it anymore, then people don't like the taste of it because it's so strong tasting.
That's really interesting. And then the next one is, does Philanthus work topically?
Yes, it's a great, it's got that numbing property. So if you've got sores that you're trying to heal and things like that, it helps with taking some of the pain away, but it also is antiseptic and a little bit antibiotic in nature too. So it's a great topical.
All right. Will Valerian work for restless leg syndrome?
For sometimes, some people it works. That restless leg syndrome, that's an interesting condition that varies a lot from person to person. It's definitely worth trying. And the other one to try for a restless leg is skullcap.
Okay, and that brings us into our next question, which is, what is the best dosage for valerian root in skullcap combination?
If you're gonna, they make some over-the-counter herbals that have them already portioned out. So if you go that route, look for whatever the doses is on the label, but really try it. Small doses are always better to start with. If I'm giving somebody a tincture, I start them out with like drop doses, like 1 to 5 drops. And then you build from there until you find your sweet spot that works for you.
Okay, the next question, is red clover used topically for inflammation like arthritis?
It can be, but it's really more working with that lymphatic system of your body internally to help with, the fluid that's stuck in the tissues and getting it to move like it's supposed to. Help that sewer system of your body do its work.
Okay. Is there a particular yarrow that is better? I've heard the white one is medicinal.
The white one is the native. It's the natural one. The white one will actually variegate itself depending on the acidity of the soil, and it turns pink. And pink yarrow is actually used more in an energetic sense for issues of codependence. White yarrow is used more as a warrior protector energetically, and they are both the same in terms of using them physically for medicine. They're both a bitter nervine, they're both cooling, they're both help to move the blood and balance the blood. So
Okay.
the cultivars that are yellow and different colors like red and that have some similar properties, but I don't know constituent wise if they're quite as medicinal as the white.
Okay. And are all roses created equally? What they mean is, can all of them be infused? Is one of them better?
When you get into looking at, there's people that do nothing but work with roses as their herbal niche that they are in, and there's really specific apothecary roses that have come down, through history and that are used specifically for certain things. I do think that there is definitely interchangeability across the board with the rose family, the roses in the rose family, I should say, and that, whatever you can get and grow and is in your area is one that's good for you to use.
Okay. Is there an advantage to freeze dry herbs?
I think depending on how they're, manufactured, if you're talking about ones that you're getting in commerce, yeah, they're fresher. They can save more of the properties that sometimes will disappear when something's dried with heat or air.
Okay. And do you use dry or fresh leaves / petals for hydrosols?
Those are made out of the fresh plants. Yep.
Okay. And then, in your opinion, air dry versus dehydrate?
I have the opportunity to air dry here because we don't live in a very humid. I mean, we get a couple of weeks of humidity here in the north, but I know there's places and herbalist friends of mine that live in like South Carolina, and it's just like not even a chance that they can air dry stuff, and so they absolutely need to use a dehydrator. So
Okay.
you just got to make sure you get a dehydrator, or when you're using your oven, that you try and keep that temperature down to keep it raw. So like below 115 is kind of the number that you want to think about on the dehydrator.
So about 115 on the dehydrator.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then how long to dry the herbs and at that answers that one. At what temperature? So the next question answer is 115. And then roughly how long would you say it would take to dry them?
Everybody's different. You know, you just have to practice and watch. Leafy things dry faster, roots dry slower. You chop things up, you know, so that they're uniform, like especially roots. You want to chop them up small while they're fresh so that you can get them into nice tiny pieces and they'll dry more evenly for you. And things like mushrooms, those all vary as well.
Okay, and that's going to take care of the next couple of questions, which were, what can we get some tips on herb drying? And then can you use dehydrator? Yes, you can, it sounds like. And then someone had the question, you mentioned the little packets, the silicone packets. Do you need those? Are those required?
No, not at all. But let me tell you, you go into your herb closet and you open a jar of something you think you're going to use that still had moisture in it when you put it in the jar and you didn't check it and it's moldy, that can prompt you to either make sure your stuff is more dry or that's what was happening to me. A couple of jars of things that I really depended on, you know, became, and then I was dumping out some vitamin bottles or something like that. I'm like, oh, these little packets, these are food grade. Why don't I get some of these and just give myself assurance that I'm not gonna be sad when I go to my herb jar one day. So
Well, especially after all that work, yeah.
yeah, and they're inexpensive. You just have to make sure you get food grade ones and not the kind they put in tennis shoe boxes.
Nice. Yes, get the food grade ones for sure. And then let's see, were all the plants wild or which ones were cultivated by you?
All the ones that are in my yard are native plants. The ones that were cultivated, that are ones that you can get, you know, at the greenhouse or in the seed shelf, were the calendula and the Philanthus, but that's wild somewhere else. Everything else, I think, was a natural plant.
Okay.
Let me look. The Echinacea that came from, well, someone else's yard, but it was still, that's not one that grows out in the wild. Okay.
Okay. That looks like all of the questions that I had written down. So if anyone has any other questions, please be polite. We got a hand up right there. 1 second here. Go ahead, Sherry.
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm really loving everything that you guys are doing. I wanted to find out how do you obtain the recording of this after the session? Because I have to listen to it from the beginning all the way.
It is going to be posted hopefully by tomorrow afternoon. Once we get finished with the video, we'll have to prep it and get it loaded up to our YouTube channel. And that is in the comments. Otherwise, if you go to YouTube Whole Foods Co-op, I'll put the link in before we end.
Thank you so much.
Yes, and that will also have 1 through 8 on there as well.
Thank you.
And
Awesome.
it might not be up until Thursday. I have a full day tomorrow, so we'll get it to you as soon as possible.
That'll be fine.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Because I'm like, I just came from a hard day of work, and I'm like, oh, I can't believe that I'm on the train and I'm in and out with but I'm, very, very much learning.
Yeah, well, keep an eye out for that, Sherry. And if you ever want to check out any more of our virtual classes, just go to wholefoodscoop.com. And it looks like Maria has their hand raised, so we're going to unmute that.
I wanted to thank you. That was absolutely fantastic. And I think there's several other people that put in the chat. We would love, 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 love a class on pictures, salves, and whatever else you can offer us, Stacy. And that was beautiful what you said about respecting Mother Earth and plants and just do that. So thank you.
No, well, thank you. And I owe it all to my wonderful teachers that taught me that very most important rule.
Let's see, and we have another question here. And I don't want to mispronounce anyone's names. Aria?
It's okay. That's not even my name.
Okay.
It's Ashley.
Hey,
I don't
Ashley.
know why it shows up my like Google name, but okay. So I know we didn't talk about any of this, but I just recently discovered that I have horseweed growing in my backyard. Are you able to do anything with that?
Okay, so did you mean horsetail? It said forceweed on the chat, so I'm not sure. Spell what you think you're finding.
It's literally spelled the word horse and then weed.
Okay, I'm wondering if it's the same. So look up, I'm going to tell you the Latin name. It's called,
It's
Okay,
Canadian, sorry, it says Canadian horseweed. That's, I don't know if that's even any more. I'll write it in the
You know
chat
what?
on the long name.
you know what you need to do is put that in with the Latin and put it in Google and say Latin name. And then as soon as you find that out, then we can decide if that's the same plant we're talking about.
Okay,
So, does it look like a bottle brush?
pretty much, yes.
Yeah. So if what I think it's probably Equisetum arvense, which we call horsetail here. And yes, it's really high in silica, and it's used for helping our bodies with that, because we need silica to make cartilage and well, pretty much all of our tissues and our bony and hard or soft tissues, and so it can be helpful. But there's some caveats around how you need to use it and prepare it, because it needs to be strained really well because it is so high in silica. But it makes a great to infuse in oil and use as a topical, in addition to ways that you can use it internally.
Okay, I just put in the chat the name that off of my plant ID, that's what it called. So I don't know if that's
Oh,
it.
it's called fleabane. And that is not what we're talking about if it says it's fleabane.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. It's just a long plant that I have, and I'm like, I don't know what I can do with this.
Yeah. Well, it's a good one for you to get to know and research. That's exactly what this class is about.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Jennifer, I saw, yes, shave grass. Anna, that's another name for it. Jennifer, I saw that. You said it's hard to get rid of. Horsetail grows in dry, acidic, sort of gravelly, sandy soil. So the way to get rid of it is to amend the soil so that it has more like peat and things like that in it, make it more rich.
Yeah, that'd be great, except I'd have to dig up my entire flower bed, which is gigantic.
So what you do is then you just pull it all up and you use it for things like plugged up, sneezy, runny, drippy, plugged ear, sinus as a tea, and you use it as a topical for your creaking, aching joints from moving all your boxes.
Right, exactly.
We talked about horsetail if this is the one, Ashley, in our last class, and there's pictures of it on the video, and we talk a little bit more about the uses for it. So.
Okay, thank you. I'll look at it.
All right, Sherry, did you have another question? Hand is raised, but I don't.
No, I'm gonna look up.
Good. All right, let's see. My daughter just discovered Momorica balsaminia.
That name is not sounding familiar to me. There are so many herbs in the world. I don't know them all.
But quite a few, if I may say. Okay, does anyone else have any questions that they'd like to ask Stacy? No? If you are new and this was your first class, you can go to YouTube. There is a link in the chat and it is Whole Foods Co-op. You can also, if you're interested in more classes like this or in yoga or something of that nature, you can go to our wholefoods.coop/classes. It looks like we have another question. Do cherry blossoms have any properties?
Well, cherry bark does for sure. And cherry blossoms, I think you can use them in the same way that you might use the rose petals, and that they're going to be mildly astringent and uplifting and feel good to your heart. So as a tea or as a like a hydrosol or an astringent, or to put them into honey for a little bit of a boost there. I think that that would be nice.
Okay, Lisa, did you have a question? Please feel free to unmute your microphone and ask. Is it Liz? No questions?
Are you talking to me too, S's?
Yes, I'm sorry.
I was just trying to find out if the Q&A is included in the recordings that are on the YouTube.
The chat?
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
not the chat, but the Q&A aspect of it, this part. Where
Oh,
the
yeah,
communication-
there'll be I have been sending the text piece to it. I'm not sure if it's posted there or not. Jen?
Okay.
Yep, it's not, the actual transcript is not part of the video. But I believe the chat is included on the recording. So you'll see the chat come up. I could be wrong. So we'll take a look at one of the old ones and let you know if that is the case or not.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering about the verbal exchange at the end of the video.
Oh yeah, that's always recorded.
Awesome, thank you.
Sure thing.
All right, did we miss anybody?
What do you recommend for thyroid or hormonal issues?
Oh, that's everybody's different, and we don't know what's going on with that whole system. So that's a consult. So hypo and hyper and progesterone and estrogen and all of, yeah, that cortisol, that needs to be sorted.
Okay, and then Uma would like to know if you are available to give tips via email.
Absolutely. And I also do Zoom consults, and I have on my website, there's a forum that you can, fill out with questions, and I can get back to you that way too. So however you want to get a hold of me and however we want to connect.
Okay, and it looks like,
Stacy? Yeah, I was just gonna ask, is it Stacy at Energy Life or Energy for Life? Okay, Stacy at.
I can type it. I can type in the chat too.
I got it. It's done.
Oh my God. See, this is why I don't ever want to do this without a helper. Thank you both, Andre and Jennifer, for being the co-host.
very welcome. And it looks like we have another question. Let's see. What do you recommend for anxiety, depression, and OCD?
Again, that's kind of a, there's balancing of body chemistry that is individual, and we need to look at what are the layers and what's causing, is it the chicken and the egg kind of thing? So that's a little hard. For trying some of the gentle nervines can be very helpful. So there's the chamomile, there's skullcap, that's a Scutellaria laterifolia. That's our skullcap that's in our mint family. Passion flower could be tried. All of these are very gentle, and you can start out with things like tea and try that. But if you are on already medications for some of these conditions, you'll want to check and make sure that you're not going to have a contraindication with whatever you're taking.
All right. And Jen, were you going to post that website?
I think
Thank you.
she did.
And it looks like Uma and the Merits, we're going to have that posted up here soon. And if you do miss it during the live chat in class, it will also be on YouTube, which would be YouTube/Whole Foods Co-op. Also, the link is in the chat.
So one last question here: to find an herbalist in your area, just one of the best things to do is just Google like herbal guild, you know, wherever you live. Like there's a really big herbal guild down in the Minneapolis area, which is south of here, about 3.5 hours. And it's just, there's many accomplished herbalists that belong to that group. And so that's one place in Minnesota. So yeah, if you just Google, you know, the herbalist community, it will pull up, you know, more of a general group, and then maybe you will want to go and join the club.
Yes. Thank you very much, Jennifer. All right. Did anyone have any other questions? No? Okay.
Well, I thank you all for being part of this class and for being so interested and have such good questions. And I hope that the information has been helpful and that you have a chance to go through and look at the whole series. And if you haven't seen the whole thing, because we started out with like the history of herbalism, Western herbalism, and just some other things about categorizing and how to decide what herb fits in what category and how can they be used. So there's a lot of information in the earlier classes too.
And I want to say thank you very much, Stacy. If you did miss those earlier classes, once again, you can find those on YouTube. If you're interested in other classes, much like this, otherwise we also have yoga and some other options. You can go to wholefoods.coop/classes, and you can select from the different classes that we do have to offer. Stacy, thank you very much. Looks like a lot of people learned things, including myself, and you're such a gracious host.
Well, thank you for being such a gracious co-host.
Well, I do what I can.
Jennifer, you too. Couldn't have done any of this without you, and you will be missed when you move on. But thank you. We have a great someone to follow and fill your shoes, hopefully.
Indeed. I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you, Stacy, for hosting. And yeah, check us out at wholefoods.coop for any future classes. We'll have a whole new lineup coming out in the beginning of October. Most of those will be in-person classes, but we will offer some that are virtual. So keep watching for those to come out. Thanks again, everybody, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you all. Bye now.
Thank you.